more emotional, really, which causes us to be more emotional, and it makes us have a desire to be protected and covered and cherished and nurtured and romanced. So, you start getting little crushes, and you start realizing, oh, boys are so cute, and I want to hold his hand, la, la, la. And for a woman, the whole point of a relationship is to be wooed. That's like, for us, being wooed is the pinnacle of intimacy. Being wooed, having like our hearts sought after, emotional engagements, having someone who hears our heart, not only listens to it but understands it, and even if he doesn't understand it, he treasures it and values it. That's part of being romanced. So Gabby's question is, what do we do between when those hormones come in, when we start having those feelings, and when we can actually act on them by being romanced, being wooed? It's a really good question. That time period is a time period where you get to discover who you are as a woman and what it means to step into femininity and understanding your own desires, what you love, what you dislike, what makes you tick. Because if you start getting romanced before you even know what those things are, because of the way we're built, we'll let anything romance us. Anything. And it takes a process of maturity and of trial and error to discover what actually moves our heart. Because that's what it's all about. If you start dating this guy who's into something you're totally not into, but he is giving you emotional attention, what are you going to do? You're going to feel like you're being romanced in the way you need to be romanced. We'll get a few months and it falls apart because you don't feel loved, you don't feel cherished, and you recognize that something isn't satisfying you. So, for the time being, you get to step away, find out what makes me tick, what do I love, what do I dislike, what do I value about the opposite sex, and recognizing my heart needs to be wooed and protected. So where are you going to put your heart right now during this waiting season? Jesus, right? And so you give him your heart and you trust him to woo you. You trust him to understand your heart, because even your husband will never know your heart the way that God does. And that's why it's important to let him satisfy you first. Because if you start letting guys satisfy your heart before you even know who you are, and before you really let God have that connection, when you get married, God will he'll be here, and then you'll still be dissatisfied with your spouse. I see it all the time. Girls get married, they expect that their husband is going to fill the role of their best friend, the role of God, the role of their father, the role of their brother, the role of the romancer. And then he doesn't meet 95% of those because he wasn't made to. So it's important to learn now about just taking a step back and watching relationships. Watch those relationships around you, whether they're healthy or unhealthy, and just start observing, how does this couple function? Does he know how to woo her heart? Oftentimes in the relationships that are dysfunctional, you'll notice that he doesn't. And you'll also probably see a lot of times that their interests are totally different. But they're committed to each other, so they haven't divorced yet. That's a lot of times what happens. Even in dating relationships, you'll see one or the other give up the things that they love, the things that they're passionate about, to keep this connection, because they've built intimacy and they don't want to lose the intimacy. Well, they kind of already have, because they don't really know each other. They don't really know how to function in that healthy relationship. Is that helpful at all? Really? So with the romance right now, what are you going to do with it?
Give it to God.
Give it to God. And when do you think it's a good time to pick it back up? How are you going to know that you're ready?
I think that person will breach through,
Is it possible for not the right person to breach through that?
I hope not.
So
I think so.
what would be determining factors to see whether or not that person is right?
Well, if I'm giving my romance to God, then the person would have to go through God to get it. So that would be good.
Theoretically speaking, that's really good. What does that look like practically?
Meaning, like in the church?
Meaning in life. That sounds really great. How are you going to practically implement that? How are you going to... Okay, let me give you an example. You're 20 years old, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You've been in school for a little bit. You hang out with all believers that have been going to school with you. You've been going to small groups together. You find this guy that you're really great friends with. You go running together all the time. You have really similar interests, and he loves
I'm
Jesus.
good already.
Right? Okay.
Where is he?
So you meet this guy, and you're at a small group one night, and he's like, "Hey, Gabby, you know, I just have to let you know, I really am just taken away by you. You're just breathtaking and beautiful, and I want to get to know your heart. I want to know what it'd be like to do life with you."
Uh-oh.
Okay? So he dumps all that on you. You've been friends for a little bit. You kind of know each other. You're in a place where you're 2 years into college. You're very enthralled with all of that. You're working hard for your grades. You're on a track scholarship or cross-country scholarship. So you're running all the time. And you start to spend time with this guy. You're like, okay, this is good. Because he said all the right things, right? And he loves the Lord.
Mm.
Okay, well, as time goes on, you realize that he doesn't quite understand your need to really focus on the things that you love doing. He doesn't get or respect it, and he becomes angry with you because you're not giving him all your time, all your attention. And you also realize that when you say, "Oh, I'm going to go spend time in the Word right now," that he gets really upset with you, and that then you give that up because he wants to spend time with you. He looked awesome in the beginning. He looked perfect. But as time went on, you realized that his priorities weren't the same, and that, yeah, he loved God, but he didn't really know God or have a relationship with him in the way that you do, and that you would want for him to be the head of your household when you get married. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's not a very